theory has to have a priority.
Capitalism and artificial intelligence are the same thing.
The dimension of the future has disappeared.
There is actually no representation anymore.
There is no final resolution to contradiction.
Militant proletarian snake handling over abysses never gets much wilder than this.
All right, everybody, welcome back to The Dangerous Maybe. And today, Nance and I are once again joined by Chris Cutrone. And last couple of weeks, we've been thinking about you, Chris, because there's been a lot of stuff in the news. And Nance and I have been wanting to pick your brain on what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but AI is at the forefront. And we have discussed AI in the past, but I love kind of just returning to this topic with you whenever it feels appropriate. And so that's what we're here to do, among other things. I think we'll probably talk a little bit about Trump today and Iran and the gas situation and even aliens, perhaps. It should be a fun talk here. So great to have you back. Before we get into it, Nance, what's up?
Well, you know, just driving down the highway to the dangerous Cutrone zone. No, I think, yeah, there's so much stuff going on right now. I saw on Reddit and on YouTube a lot of people talking about like data centers in Utah, and they all had the facts wrong. And I just Googled it and I looked into it, and like it's not that difficult to find what is true and what is not true. But as people are kind of more and more exhausted with work and more carried away with just the crazy state of the world, it seems like people care less and less about the facticity of things, and they run with narrative.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, yeah, there's crazy stuff going on. I mean, it's here in Arizona, we're running out of water. Electricity bills keep going up, and all across the Southwest, South America, parts of Asia, like AI is a genuine concern. But there's these narratives on one side, it's going to save us all and we're going to live in the utopian future, or it's the end of the world and it's horrible, and it's all narrative, and like the facts have kind of evaporated. So I do think it's important to talk about this stuff from like a measured structural kind of point of view, systemic point of view. And I think you're one of the best people to do that with. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So one thing that occurred to me, I think that when you reached out to me, you mentioned Bernie's opposition to AI as like the occasion for our conversation.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about it immediately in political terms, in partisan political terms. Like, why would AOC and Bernie take a stance of proposing a national moratorium on AI?
Deceleration.
Specifically on the AI build out, right? And so I wanted to kind of just look globally at what I think Trump is trying to do, Trump and his administration, what that team is trying to do, and how the tech bros got behind him in the 2024 election in a way that they had opposed him previously.
Right.
So they kind of switched teams, they switched sides, they switched parties. Even though the CHIPS Act was under Biden. And so there was this attempt at an industrial policy, and in part, it reflected the Democratic Party's adaptation to Trumpism, meaning an attempt to compete with Trump on Trump's own ground, namely the repatriation of industry, onshoring, this kind of thing. And so the CHIPS Act, went some distance, but now it seems that Trump in the second term is going much further. And you might have heard of the 25 like new cities idea that they had in the 2024 prior to the 2024 campaign. And again, this was the sort of quasi Peter Thiel kind of model city, you know, uh, sort of displace the old cities, build brand new cities, and it sounded like these would be some kind of dystopia, some kind of neoliberal libertarian billionaire fantasy of society. And of course it would be in the red states. So that's what I wanted to sort of come around to. So far, the AI build out that Trump is trying to organize has met with some resistance from the blue states and from blue cities, a kind of NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of resistance. But generally speaking, Trump's AI build out, but also just his general onshoring of industry and his general kind of reindustrialization has been concentrated on the red states. And there is, I think, an intention to starve out the blue states. In other words, to build out the new economy in the red states and to starve out the blue states. And so Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is encouraging people to move out of the blue states where there are no jobs and move to the red states where the new jobs will be. And they do. They intend this, right? Now, why the red states and not the blue states? It's not mere partisanship, although of course it is that. The red states generally have less regulation, like environmental regulation, and are willing to give a freer hand to corporate capitalism. And so this is part of a partisan war that we're going through. Meaning, post-COVID, there already was a flight from the blue cities and a flight from the blue states because of the COVID restrictions. I mean, I myself felt the impulse. I had friends who lived in red state America, and I was like, damn, you're less restricted than I am in this COVID regime, and I want out. I was in a blue city in a blue state. I was in Chicago. It was fucking hell. Like, they closed the lakefront, they closed the parks. It was hell. I felt very trapped here. So that was already an impulse, and then they're feeding that impulse. So low tax, low regulation, they're doing CapEx tax breaks for the corporations where they can write off all of their capital investment uh, expenditure. And of course, throw all caution to the wind with respect to poisoning the environment. Right? I mean, look, what it boils down to is this: the Trump people are hell bent on restoring American capitalism's prominence in the world. And frankly, Trump's in China now. The world needs the United States to bounce back economically. The world growth, Europe and China require, as well as the developing world, of course, require American growth to pull the global economy out of the rut. And so there was a double rut, right? There was the Great Recession and then there was the COVID shock. And, Trump's treating it as an opportunity, on all sorts of levels, right? That it exposed the vulnerability of supply chains, COVID. And, so there are many reasons that they can give for doing this. Now, that was true before AI became the kind of going concern that it became in the second term. Like, leading up to the second term into the 2024 election, AI was there, but per se, like this build out phenomenon, the AI boom was not really a prospect, but they're making it into that. And they've also said very explicitly that even if it's a mini boom, a mini economic boom based purely on construction, like even if they build these things and they're never used, that's still good. Right? And by the way, there was already a problem with electrical capacity, the electrical grid. And there were problems with water supply. So this is a reason to subsidize the electrical grid and water supply, and also make the corporations pay for it. So give the corporations massive tax breaks, but make them provide their own electrical and water supply. It's also a way of jumpstarting the nuclear industry by producing mini nuclear reactors to power the AI plants, which they're doing. They reopened 3 Mile Island, the site of the famous nuclear accident, in order to power AI. So they're blowing through all the inhibitions, all the regulations, all the reluctance, all the hesitation. They're just blowing past all that. And I think that Trump is determined to have a kind of fait accompli, so that by the end of this term, there will be irreversible change to the American economic landscape.
All right, let me ask you, because Nance, like when you hear, like your energy bill is constantly being affected by the data center, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Chris, they can't think that Americans can just keep their energy bills keep upping average workers' energy bills and think this is sustainable.
That's not.
No, and so
Yeah.
look, I mean, it harkening back to the last time we talked to Nick Land, but he points out that Elon Musk a couple months ago was on X really talking about how we have to figure out how to stream the energy of the sun. We have to suck on the teat of the sun. And the question is, do you think Musk can pull this off relatively soon? How to harness solar energy to such an extent that we can just basically have an infinite amount of energy to stream, as he land.
I don't know if they're going to be able to do that very quickly. No, I mean, obviously, Elon Musk is, many of the tech bros are relatively young, meaning they can carry on for a while. Trump just has this term. And so it's about setting the conditions for more long-term development, and also getting the ball rolling in a way that there would be too much vested interest to reverse it. Right. So I think that's why Bernie and AOC are trying to stop it now, because they realize that once it really gets going, it will be irreversible. And they would have problems with nuclear energy too. Right. So, it's not as if it's not dangerous. It is dangerous. I mean, I grew up with the kind of nuclear energy scare that was kind of annoying, because people made it seem like a nuclear power plant can have like a mushroom cloud explosion, which it can't. Right. Like that was just really annoying. And it was in the context of the renewed Cold War, the second Cold War under Reagan. But so they've maybe made some improvements in terms of safety, but also, no, it's probably, there are some safety concerns. But they're going to do it. Now, solar, the big problem with like wind and solar is that China has an advantage manufacturing these things, manufacturing windmills, manufacturing solar panels. And there is a question of, how more efficient solar panels can be made to be. So they have to sort of think outside the box a little bit and try new things.
Although I think Musk is talking about building something that goes into space,
and beams it
harnesses
down.
the energy directly in space, and then somehow we have it on tap and we can
Microwave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Microwave transmission of power from orbital solar collectors. That's right. That's very possible to do.
Okay.
Again, it has a sort of initial cost that's very high, but then after that, it would sort of
Yeah, but
presumably
if anybody
pay for
would
itself.
be willing to do the investment and be able to do it, it would be Musk.
Yeah, he might do that. He might get the government to subsidize it. So he might, get multiple governments to subsidize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think that these things are likely to happen. And so, but again, I think that now that the tech bros have changed allegiance, or at least proved unreliable for the Democrats, and because there is a stated intention to skew this development in favor of the red states against the blue states, then there's going to be a lot of resistance to it.
Do you think this would be like if we get a Democrat winning the next election, does there become a very sharp halt, a strong
I don't think so.
deceleration?
I think that they will get. I think things will be in train to such an extent that it will be irreversible. And also, they were talking about this a lot last year, less so this year, about the AI race between China and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And there was all this kind of prognostication about AI like attaining self-awareness in 2027. And where does it happen first? Does it happen in China first or in the United States first, or does it happen basically simultaneously? And what would be the effect on politics in the two countries? Like, would the state rely more and more on AI to make decisions, whether military decisions or economic decisions? And then, how would it be utilized, and towards what ends, and that kind of thing. And there is still that background talk about the need to win the AI race, but it's not quite as prominent as last year. Like, there was like a moment of like, you know, reckoning or something. Like,
Well,
okay,
in
this
this
is
video
happening.
that Bernie Sanders put out a couple weeks ago, which kind of sparked Nance and I, we were talking to Vincent Lay recently. Vincent's a Nick Land scholar, and we were talking to Vincent about this. And the video is called "The Existential Threat of AI and the Need for International Cooperation." This is where Bernie is there with a bunch of AI experts. And it is like, they're sitting there talking about the existential threat of this. And what Vincent pointed out to us is before this, Bernie was concerned with this as an economic issue.
Right.
How's it going to affect jobs? Now it's this risk, this, existential risk to humanity itself. And Bernie has been hanging out a lot with Eliezer Yudkowsky, who is a very prominent AI doomer, the most doomerest of the doomers. And so, Yudkowsky's book title, I always mess it up, but it's not, if someone
anyone builds it, everyone dies.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've heard of this book. Yeah.
Right.
I might have even seen him.
Yeah.
He might have been interviewed by like Ross Douthat or something with the New York Times.
Yeah, he was
year.
on Ross.
He's basically Nick Land's deepest AI enemy. Yeah.
Right.
So
nemesis.
Well, I think I out of all of them, Nick has expressed the most the strongest
I mean, look,
disagreement.
there are reasons maybe to fear. However, I think with Bernie and with AOC and with the Democratic Party in general, under Trump now, right? I would say that there's a political expediency to it. Meaning, like, yeah, there's like maybe concern about job loss. That's one thing. And job loss among educated people, job gains among uneducated people, like the people who benefit from the build out, the kind of jobs available from the build out, might be the Trump voter jobs versus the Democratic Party voter jobs are going to be negatively impacted by AI. So it's hard for me not to see it in those terms, meaning it's convenient for Bernie to take an anti-AI attitude at this moment.
Okay, so this is what's interesting. One of the reasons we want you here. So we also recently did a reading of Mark Fisher's like classic essay, Terminator versus Avatar, and he has a very famous proclamation. He says, number one, everyone is an accelerationist. So what he means by that is everybody's on the side of technological dynamism. Nobody truly wants to go back to the feudal world. But the most probably the one that stands out the most is this third proposition he has. Marxism is nothing if it is not accelerationist. And what he means is Marxism is on the side of, technologically innovating the means of production and the economic infrastructure to the point of basically freeing us from work. And so this is where we get into this whole thing. I mean, damn Jehu has been on X, really going off about Bernie. And so I guess my question is, if I
Complaining
already know,
about
if I
Bernie.
say, Chris, are you more an accelerationist or a decelerationist? I imagine you'll kind of go in a
Say
different
neither.
direction, but
Yeah,
I'm
say
curious.
that I'm
Yeah.
both and neither. I mean, what it boils down to is this. I really do think, I wrote a short essay on this about robots in sweatshops. I really do think that automation does not free us from work in that way, other than negatively. So it costs people their jobs, but it creates other jobs, and then it has a logic of increasing sweatshop labor, even while replacing labor that can be automated. So it's sort of basically the capitalists can choose to buy machines or pay workers, and they're going to do either. They're going to make that choice based on cost. So they're going to choose to hire labor at a lower cost if they can. They're going to choose to buy machines to replace labor if they can. So they're going to do that, and they're going to do both, right? So some capitalists are going to do one, and some capitalists are going to do the other, but really both. And in that respect, we should think about this. I'm sure that we've talked about this previously, less quantitatively than qualitatively. Meaning, accelerate, decelerate has like a quantitative dimension to it, like more or less, faster or slower. Whereas really, we should be thinking qualitatively. And of course, to realize at a qualitative level the potential of technology would take a transformation of the social system beyond capitalism. And so we're left within capitalism with this kind of antinomy of more or less technology, more or less work hours. So, the robots in sweatshops idea is that technology makes some people work less, including eliminating their jobs, and it makes other people work more, right? So it is a contradictory phenomenon in that it increases the labor burden of some while eliminating the labor burden of others, including wiping out their jobs. So people lose their jobs like, let's say they lose a skilled job and have to take a unskilled job, and then they end up having to work more, right? So I think the fear about AI is the latter, meaning the fear of AI is that it eliminates white collar jobs more than blue collar jobs. So up till now, it looks like automation has cost more blue collar jobs than white collar jobs. That's not really been true. And maybe it was accompanied by an increase in pink collar jobs, like service sector jobs. Usually associated with women, but not exclusively restricted to women by any means. But now it looks like this is definitely going to impact, again, what I said earlier, the educated and white collar jobs. And that is the demographic, that's the constituency, that's the voter base of the Democratic Party. And also, that's the economy that they tend to be plugged into. So, whereas the Republicans tend to be plugged into more the smaller scale capitalist operation, the petty bourgeoisie, the kind of small business owner, tend to be Republicans. The mom and pop places tend to be Republicans, whereas the Democrats tend to be more corporate. And it seems like AI is going to eliminate the corporate jobs more than the mom and pop jobs.
You think it'll be a minute before robotics actually catches up where it can truly? I mean, look, I've seen these videos where they have these AI powered forklifts that are unloading trucks, and then the forklift takes the pallet over in the warehouse. Then you have another robot that downstacks the pallet and builds another pallet. And so I see all that and I'm like, as a warehouse worker, I'm like, okay, well, how soon does this become affordable where capitalists can invest in this? I don't know. I think you're right, and I think everybody right now is afraid of how it's going to affect white collar jobs. But me and my coworkers, we see these videos and we're like, oh, it's around the corner.
It is. I mean, okay, so they experimented with replacing truck drivers. And it turns out they couldn't, because trucks not only have to navigate the highway, but they also have to maneuver at their destination.
Yeah, and that's hard. Some docks are very tricky
Right.
to.
Right. But let's say that they build like sites that are more automation friendly, right? That don't require that kind of skilled use of the vehicle, right? Um, then, it's kind of like Waymo, you know, like self-driving cars and, replacing Uber drivers. But maybe that can work better in the suburbs than in the city. Maybe you need Uber drivers to be able to navigate city streets, but maybe in the suburbs you can have automated cars, right? I mean, look, my attitude about all this is I'm neither technophilic nor technophobic. So I was thinking earlier today before getting on with you guys, I was like, how do I feel about all this actually? Um, and I'm pretty neutral, meaning I don't feel anything about it specifically per se. I more think about like the knock-on effects, the ramifications, you know, uh, and that's where I feel like there's going to be a lot of second, third, fourth order unintended consequences. Right? There's going to be just social disruption, and that's capitalism, right? That capitalism, the core of capitalism, is that kind of social disruption, and I feel like that is probably going to be pretty ugly. It's all going to be pretty ugly. Like the AI build out in the red states with no environmental regulation, poisoning the environment, all sorts of accidents are going to happen. All sorts of mini catastrophes are going to happen. And, but also just generally there's going to be a kind of disruption. I mean, already the last 50 years of neoliberalism has seen a lot of that. And more so outside of places like the United States, actually. So a lot in the United States, but much more in the rest of the world. Separating people from their families in order to be able to work. Migratory workforces. I mean, there's a lot of that now in the United States too. People having to move for work and having to leave friends or family behind. So that kind of thing, might just be par for the course. Now, the thing with accelerationism is, on the one hand, it poses this proposition like, should we put our pedal to the metal or take our foot off the gas, hit the brakes, right? Whereas, really, the way I understand it is that the historical dynamics of capitalism have an accelerating character to them, meaning it's not about like, okay, let's accelerate this process to its completion, but rather, how is the character of historical time one of acceleration? Uh, in one way. In another way, there's also a kind of glacial, like nothing happening for decades, like for most of my lifetime. So there
Right.
was, right?
No, I
And
mean,
so,
I say this in my book where I was like, people who are into accelerationism, they argue, are you with Fisher and the future's been canceled and nothing new's happening, or are you with Land and there's this wild potential flooding the world? And what I say is, I kind of use Žižek to say it's a parallax view. It's both at the same time,
yeah,
where that's what makes it even more perplexing. If it was just one or the other, maybe it'd be easier to, cognitively map it. But when it's this, perpetual stagnation, yet this flood of the newness from the outside at the same time, it's really perplexing to try to figure out how to deal with that.
right. And so we're not going to master it in our heads. I mean, it's long since been the case. I mean,
Mhm.
society is not something that we can master in our heads anyway. But capitalism in particular is not something that we can like cognitively map and, get a handle on that way, like see the big picture as a coherent thing. We can only see it fragmentarily. And I do think, though, that one, potential advantage of accelerationism as a framework is to think about the dynamics of change. And, one thing that I tend to emphasize is that there's no automatic, like, even though Marx says capital is the automatic subject, capital is the automatic subject, but we in capitalism are not. All right, so there is a disparity. Like, to call capital the automatic subject and capital is alienated labor, and it's dead labor, and it's the past, but it's also the present, and it's creating the future. But there's also us. That describes more like an alienated objective process. But then there is a lot that we do subjectively. We don't just adjust to that. So part of my problem with this kind of a view is that it tends to be too objectivistic. It tends to turn the process into something that is just happening rather than something that we're doing. And I think that a lot of it, like when you talk about like trying to wrap our heads around it, a lot of what capitalism entails is people voting with their feet. Meaning, there are consumption patterns, there are ways that working class people adjust to new realities that are not plannable by the capitalist investors. In other words, they have to adjust to that. Like, not only does the working class have to adjust to the choices of capital investors, but capital investors can only invest based on the ground conditions that really they can't control, and that has to do with workers voting with their feet, moving, making consumption choices that are unpredictable, but nonetheless can show trends. And then by the time the capitalists try to exploit those trends, things have already changed. Right. So it's not only the working class, it's the capitalists who are playing catch up all the time. And I think that dynamic is important because otherwise it's just like, what are they doing to us? Right. And I think that's, I'm just thinking of like more traditional leftist objections to accelerationism, that it has a kind of fatalism, that it puts too much on like capital itself. Like I said, it's kind of objectivistic. And I think that all of that will happen, but what really matters is what we do in that context. Meaning as subjects rather than as just objects of this process. And I don't, the other danger about like intellectualism is that, of course, there's a strong impulse to cope with things by thinking about them. In other words, if we can sort of make sense of it in our heads, then it's not as bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
doesn't
it's
mean
like,
we're doing anything about them, though.
right, we're not doing anything about it, and also it doesn't really help us, like even individually. Like it's it might work for a little while, but it doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize that there is a kind of epistemophilia, that like love of knowing, that if we like know it, if we understand it, then it's somehow not as bad. And I think that that's an illusion. It's an illusion that we know it, and it's an illusion that it helps to know it. It's an illusion that it makes us feel not as bad. Maybe I am more in the Mark Fisher category, the kind of depressive, like.
Well, I know
like
that Nance and I tend that direction. Land's term for all of us then is transcendental miserableness, but it implies like
miserableism,
yeah.
Morrissey.
He's like, yeah, it's yeah, you mix Kant with depression. Like this is the default, form of experience that we have is, melancholy or depression.
Yeah, so accelerationism sounds like a kind of manic compensation for depression.
I mean, that's
right. out of narcissistic injury.
Well, yeah, it's like Nick would say it's something like Nietzschean joy in self-overcoming.
Yeah, that Nietzsche himself was a depressed person who also tried a manic cope.
That's a nice comeback.
Right? No. I mean, Nietzsche himself, he's like the arch version of like a depressed narcissist who's like really enthusiastic about things as a way of coping
So
with
can we say that
depression.
Nietzsche is the OG transcendental miserableness?
Maybe, yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and fits of enthusiasm versus depths of despair. This is what Lenin said that the Bohemians are subject to.
Yeah. All right, Nance. I know you've got a lot that you've been thinking about and working on with AI and researching. Why don't you? What do you want to get into?
I mean, there's a lot, because on one hand, it almost seems wise to say this is going to happen. This is happening. This is what capitalism does. Don't become fascinated by the shiny object. Like stay focused on
Right.
I don't know, whatever, emancipation or the human or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems wise to do so, but I am fascinated by the shiny object. And I think
No, I mean, it's something.
yeah, it does feel like a historic moment. Like it feels real, whereas previously we've been living in what I call dynamic stagnation. Like it's just more the same. It's all, everything's thrown up in the air, but nothing is real. Nothing happens anymore, as people on Twitter like to say. And I think that's largely true. Nothing happens anymore. But it also when you're talking about robots and sweatshops, which I think it's, yeah, like people are put out of work from their office jobs, and then they have to go clean toilets for a living. And
Exactly. Right.
yeah. But my thought is, well, that's kind of what my problem is with AI. Like it's not to become fascinated and do what I think is reactionary anti-tech, and
Right.
like I think Bernie Sanders and AOC are adopting a reactionary position.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Of course. Yeah.
But I think, and I'm going to fiction to elucidate my point, but with Blade Runner and its sequel, Wallace was trying to create replicants who could breed, so precisely so he didn't have to purchase machines, precisely so he could hire replicants like at a lower rate. And I think the metaphor there, what I've always seen as a metaphor, Philip K. Dick was trying to say, like, more human than human. It's not that AI is coming and it's going to put us all out of work and it's all this and that, but there is this objectifying process that's coinciding with all the politics and all the labor changes and all that stuff. We're also objectifying ourselves and we're also kind of diminishing ourselves. I think that's far more politically pertinent, like to have avowed leftists celebrating reactionary politics, to me seems far more problematic than having to go clean toilets or pick celery. And I've done both of those for wages, and they both suck. So I think, again, as easy as it is to get carried away with talking about AI, and I spend so much time I just read the Dartmouth proposal, and going back to Adolphe Quetelet and James Clerk Maxwell and people developing social physics and like all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Spend so much time on that. I also think we should be talking about AI politically as leftists, if that's what we call ourselves. I'm sure all three of us have been people leftists largely say they're not real leftists. They're fucking assholes.
Yeah. Right. I mean, so generally my sense is that we have a reactionary response to capitalism. Or another way of putting it is that capitalism is more revolutionary than we can be. Right? Capitalism changes things faster than we can keep up with. And so again, it's a basic character of the historical dynamic, is that we're always playing catch up. Now, as it turns out, what we do playing catch up does affect this thing that is running ahead of us out of our control. So, it is us, it is what we're doing. And I tend to think that we fetishize technology, that technology is us. And so the only question is, how do we relate to it? Which really becomes a matter of how do we relate to ourselves, both, individually, collectively, what have you. And I think that the science fiction tropes, like, because I was just thinking as you were talking about that, about like Philip K. Dick, and I was thinking about, the fantasy of waking up and realizing you're a robot, right? And do you remember the first Blade Runner? There was like ambiguity about whether the Harrison Ford character was himself a replicant
Yep.
or not. And then, the way they did that in the sequel, the way they handled that was, I don't know, it was interesting, but not entirely satisfying. But then, again, or this idea of like, I think that Star Trek Picard, the
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart, like, there was this kind of like theme. I mean, they didn't really realize anything in that series. Unfortunately, they didn't like really follow through with any of the ideas. They left a lot of things sort of underdeveloped. They threw a lot at the wall and tried to see what would stick or something. But at some point, he is a android version of himself, right?
Yep.
I think yes. And then the question is, well, are you the same person? Right. And so it's different from like a kind of physics problem of, if you were like molecularly divided,
Mhm.
right? Would you, would both be the same person or not? Right. I think I was watching a Deep Space Nine episode where Miles O'Brien, speaking of the working class, is like shifting in time, and then he has to warn his past self or maybe his future self, but then his self who is warning the future or past self dies, and then the other one takes his place by going back to the normal timeline, and then it's like, is it the same person? No, but yes, right? There's like a physics problem, right? It's like a physics philosophy problem. I feel like, and I feel like that problem was formulated like decades ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have to wonder why we pose these kinds of conundrums to ourselves. Like what, even when it's literally potentially true, still it's a metaphor. And so what does the metaphor mean? And so why is it that capitalism makes us feel like we're not sure about our self-identity? We're not sure if we're man or machine, right?
I do think and in when I was reading the Dartmouth proposal, it kind of crystallized for me. And I think throughout history, to fetishize and transhistoricize and talk about things of which I have no knowledge, but throughout history, there was a sure thing. And then Descartes and Kant came along and chopped off God's head, and capitalism swooped in to save the day. But previously in history, things were kind of the way they were. And you reached a brick wall at some point, and it was like, well, God says so. And it's kind of like how Žižek talks about the postmodern parenting versus traditional parenting. Like traditional parenting, sometimes prohibition is just prohibition. But with the postmodern parent, the superego comes in and it wants to make sure that you enjoy your prohibition. And capitalism does the same thing. Capitalism provides a functional justification or a rational justification for everything. There's no more God. There's no more dragons with 7 heads and 7 women with 7 swords and 7 seals and on and on and on. There's a rational, functional, intelligible cause for everything. So we move into a world which we can understand, and as good capitalist subjects, we are driven to understand. So I think it's this kind of historical thing maybe, and I think it's a deadlock. Like I don't know if adopting reactionary positions to say let's halt progress is going to get us anywhere, and I think it honestly probably will hurt us more. Like I live here, I see. Doesn't matter how
Also,
much
politically, do we have control over it? Let's say that we were even able to assert control over it here. That doesn't give us any control over it in China
right.
or wherever, right? And so I was thinking about it in terms of, okay, so if we sort of step back for a second, and so you brought up religion, religion that requires like a leap of faith that isn't entirely rational, that's based on mystery. It defers these questions. So I had in mind also like Durkheim, sociology guy, and he, famously said all religions are true, and that when people say God or the gods or the divine forces, what they're really referring to is society. And society is this transcendental realm that gives us, going back to the human revolution of tens of thousands of years ago, so culture and society, civilization, but culture just basically the artificial community that we're in as opposed to the natural community of a primate species. That as soon as we have that artificial community, then there is a transcendental realm that gives us a sense of a soul, of a transcendental existence, and also of immortality. Meaning I am a product of something and a participant in something that goes beyond my biological finitude. So I was thinking about like, you know, the kind of folklore around the AI tech bros, and do they want to upload their intelligence into a computer, and like this kind of stuff, right?
I do, by the way. I surely do.
Well, okay, but check it out. We already can. All right, so you know my deal with AI, right? Which is that as soon as we invent culture, as soon as there's language or an art, and as soon as there are social relations, there is artificial intelligence.
Just so you know, so there's a guy, Andy Clark, who wrote a book called Natural Born Cyborgs. Nance and I love this book. And it's basically once we have language, and I mean, we can talk about it as society, we can talk about it as culture, we can use Lacan's term and talk about it as our symbolic order, whatever we want to call the matrix of language and intelligibility, that's social and historical, whatever we want to call that. Once, here's what's interesting, Chris, like, feral children's show, we as a species are now interdependent on attaining this virtual matrix, which is the social order, in order for our very biology to come to a healthy maturation. Feral children's brains cannot properly develop biologically without learning language, without having the big other, the symbolic order. And so because of that, we are natural born cyborgs. We're already cyborgic just by having our biology depend on language. So we're with you on that.
Right. Exactly. Right. So I have an art background and I'm a writer. And I do feel very precious about like the artwork that I've made and the writing that I've done. In the sense that I feel like losing it or messing with it, altering it is messing with my immortality. It's like a threat to my soul, basically. And so when I think of uploading my intelligence, I just think, well, I've written articles and books. That's how I've uploaded my intelligence, right? That's my immortality. Because, like uploading my intelligence in the sense of having a computer simulate my intelligence, that wouldn't be me anymore, right? But it wouldn't be like my consciousness.
But what if your brain, what if the machine could keep your brain alive, at least indefinitely? And
so,
yeah, the brain in a jar paradox.
Yeah, Boltzmann brains.
But let's say that it could keep, but it wouldn't last literally forever, right? And so there would still be the question of finitude, and there would also be, vulnerability to death and, disease, all sorts of things. So, because nothing's foolproof, right? And obviously when we're the Cymex, like in Dune or whatever, Like, then we'll just be killing each other. So we'll be immortal in these machines, but then we'll attack each other in these machines and try to kill each other. Right.
Well,
So
what else we
you know
gonna
what I
do?
mean? What else are we gonna do? Yeah, right. So no, right. So the thing is, it doesn't take all that. Now, we don't have to cling to our biological existence, right? We don't have to fear death in that way, right? And there is, I'm an Adorno scholar, and Adorno wrote about this, about like the centrality of death in modern philosophy, like Heidegger and Sartre and whatever,
Mhm.
and how morbid that is. In other words, why did we, or the Nazi slogan, "Only death is real." You know, it's like, nah, like humans didn't do that for tens of thousands of years. They didn't fear death the way we fear death.
Baudrillard in Symbolic Exchange and Death argues that we have essentially repressed death, and that's why we've made death into this monster, this unknowable thing. Whereas older traditional societies, death was far more incorporated into the symbolic interactions and exchanges. So what it was more like, if your family member died, okay, they're not here in the sense that we're here, but because you continue to exchange, if we send prayers or we make offerings, they make it rain. And it was a way of making death a part of our life.
Baudrillard's a little bit too much of a conservative, actually. He is a
Okay, in what
conservative.
way here?
Well, because he is celebrating traditional culture, traditional civilization. Like, obviously, we wouldn't have what we have now unless that stopped working for us.
Hmm.
Right? So that stopped working for us at a certain point. And so we had to change how we do that. And, again, I will invoke Durkheim and say we're in a pathology of transition, meaning we lost the old way of doing it. We haven't really achieved a satisfying way of doing it. So I think that the reason that we cling to biological existence and fear death is that we're uncertain of our immortality. And the reason that we're uncertain of our immortality is because of the alienated society we're living in.
Hmm.
Meaning that the prior social forms were not alienated the way capitalism is alienated, and therefore we fear death more. We fear for our immortal soul more than they did. More drastically, more nihilistically. They feared for their immortal soul, but that caused them to act in certain ways. That caused them to respect the sacred. Whereas we can't even do that, right? Like, it's not like a motivator, like
Yeah, we
fear
seem
for
to
your immortal
form
soul.
death cults around it. Like everything ultimately bottoms out in seeking exit, escape.
I mean, look,
or even
there's like death by cop, like the guy who tried to bust into the White House correspondence dinner, Cole Allen, like taking that weird selfie, making that weird face when he's like strapped with like his weapons or whatever and dressed up nice. And I'm like, what is this guy thinking, And I think he's thinking he's going to immortalize himself
Yep.
or something. But by doing this heroic act of self-negation, and obviously there's like a mental health component to it, I'm sure. However, it's also contextualized, shaped by a cultural context. It's not just pure insanity, right? It's like he seized on to like some kind of a model of behavior.
Thick,
You know?
Thick Quang Duke. I'm bastardizing the name, but the Tibetan monk who self-immolated
Right.
in the Vietnam War, like that photograph, that image was like seared into our minds. And there is a romanticism around this type of
There's a
self-sacrifice.
romanticism. There is.
Yeah.
What was the
for
guy who
sure.
did that a couple years ago protesting?
Burnell?
Yes.
the American
Yeah.
soldier.
Yes. That's right. And I just say children don't do that.
Well, yeah. Do
Because
you feel like
we're
that's
not
also
Buddhist monks, right? So we're Buddhist monks, maybe, but even then, I'm not sure that the Buddhist monk in Vietnam in the '60s is quite the Buddhist monk of like, I don't know, 500 years ago. It's a little bit of an as if. It's like, well, as if I were a Buddhist monk, then I would do this ritual thing, suicide, to maintain my sacred values. But no, it's like a political protest, and so therefore it's no longer that. So I just think I would have told that guy. I would have told the the Buddhist monk, please don't.
Chris, have you seen?
Yeah.
Have you been keeping up with this guy? That the entire internet, the whole world hates this guy, Chud the Builder.
I don't know if I know him or not. Chud, like cave, like
So-
Cannibalistic
or
humanoid underground dweller.
Yeah.
underground dweller, right?
So this guy in the last, I don't know, the last month or so came on my radar. What he does is he's a white guy. He lives in Nashville. He goes up to black
I think
people.
Chuds can only be white. I
Well,
think.
there you go.
Yeah, properly. Yeah, according
Don't
to
you
the big
think?
other. Yeah.
Anyway,
The big other says. So this guy, he live streams and he goes up to black people and starts throwing the N-word at them. And it's just become a huge like amplification process. And finally, I
Why?
mean, he tweeted something where like series finale of this show is, you know, somebody, I'm gonna kill somebody. And I'm like, oh, well, talk about incriminating yourself. Well, yesterday he shot a black guy. And now the guy's in jail. This is just wild. But to me, it's like this.
I think you were gonna say. I thought plot twist. I thought for the finale of this show, I'm gonna kill someone, meaning I'm gonna get myself killed.
Well, and so
Like,
that's what I brought this up for. Is it seems like the guy has actually a death wish, and it
Yeah.
makes you wonder, like, is that where we're going? Where it's like, people think like I want to die on camera, and this guy thinks
That's
he's
immortalization.
yeah, and this guy thinks he's doing it in the name of free speech, and it's like, dude, like you're so I should be able
Oh,
to
in the
say
name of
this
free
without
speech.
anybody getting mad or reacting, and it's like it's such a stunt, it's such bullshit.
But then he shot somebody, so that's
Right,
not,
because he feels like, oh well, if you get mad and get aggressive, my life's in danger. It's like, do you have any idea how self-defense laws work? You can't be the one who starts the altercation and amps it up, especially by dropping the N-word to random
fighting
black
words.
people. Yeah, and then go, oh, you're being aggressive and mean. I have the right to defend myself. It's like, you feel like, no, dude, you're just you
Oh,
want
is that what happened? So he escalated and then shot someone
Well, that's as far as I understand
out
it.
of quote unquote self-defense.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to hide behind self-defense, even though
I mean,
he
it could
starts
be. It
these.
could be that, you know, no matter what you say to someone, it can't justify killing them. Being,
Yeah, but
right?
this guy like he'll act like if a black dude like shoves him or like even gets up in his face or something, he's sitting there acting like this is, you know, the threat of violence. It's like, dude, you started it, you provoked it. These guys were sitting here minding their business, and
Right. There would be an obligation. I think in most states there'd be an obligation to retreat.
right. So my thing is, I brought this example up just because it seems like is this a symptom of this weird thing where it's like people want to die in front of the camera? Like, is that where like social media brain is taking everybody? It's like, I don't know, but it seems like there's something happening.
It'd be a
where-
terrible way to be remembered, and also insofar as it's kind of nothing, it's not really going to be remembered terribly much,
No,
like
this is the kind of thing that once the situation's resolved, everybody forgets it in, you know, a matter of
moves on.
a week, yeah, or whatever.
Yeah, so it's a weird rehearsal, it seems like, or an enactment, to use psychoanalytic terms, of, an experience. So it's sort of a protest against an experience while it's repeating that experience.
Mhm.
It would seem. So, I mean, social media is oppressive, and I guess one of the ways that people deal with its oppressiveness is to subordinate themselves to it, is to try to become it. Like, I don't know, Anna Freud, identification with the aggressor.
Mhm.
That you imitate something that you find threatening, and you try to master it by participating in it that way. I mean, it's a very strange thing, and also that society is present in the form of technology. So that's the other point about like technological fetishism, is that the fetishism of technology is the fetishism of society, but in this kind of objectified form. So I think that, you know, I guess people just spontaneously do this, and because they don't have a reflective capacity, they don't have categories for recognizing it. I kind of feel like, damn, I know too much, so none of this would be like compelling. Like I couldn't do this and take myself seriously. Like this kind of behavior is sort of forbidden to me because I would always be like, yeah, but this is just an enactment, or like it's like, wouldn't it
Yeah,
be
but that
great to
seems
be like a
with so many younger people, it seems like that's all that is reality. Like,
right, right? They
did
got no
I did
perspective
I
on it.
did I go flowing through the algorithm? And Nance, you and I have talked about this before, this idea of, people are going to do more and more
Extreme
perverse
things.
or violent things just to have a moment in the algorithm.
I mean, again, as an artist, I do think that there's something being perversely mobilized there that I would otherwise respect.
Mhm.
You know, um, namely to objectify yourself in art, and that can take many forms. It doesn't have to be like your body. There are many aspects of the self that can be externalized and objectified, and made into, an object of aesthetic consumption, contemplation, whether it's meant to be like art immortal, like objects, like really precious high art objects, or whether it's just keeping a kind of an aesthetic culture going by feeding the content, you know? So it's, yeah, the narcissism of it. Like, I don't know, of being a porn star, being a woman who gets fucked by 1,000 men, right? As just like, I want to do that, you know? And it's like, okay, even though it's like ephemeral jerk off material. Like it's not like, okay, and this is going to be in the Museum of Modern Art
It's not the
gallery.
Colossus of Rhodes. It's
Yeah,
not the Great Wall of China.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
Um,
to go back to Baudrillard just for a minute, though, like one of the things I appreciate about his thinking is when he starts basically talking about, I'm just going to call it fractal value, where
mm,
the value of what counts as value is what spreads across screens, and it's this completely, going viral form of valuation. And he was saying like this is going to become more and more prominent as the internet takes hold. And I think this is where we come back. We're like, is this really what we want to be the standard of what matters in our world? Is whatever gets the most
so
attention on screens?
let me zoom out again. Okay, so if this is the form that society takes, if this is its objectifiable form, if this is I was just teaching Adorno and Horkheimer sort of protest against the idea that like mass culture is like the replacement for religion. It's like objective religion, basically. They're like, well, no, because religion, at least there was some identity between the community and its culture, whereas this is alienated in this way in capitalism. And so to just say that it is the religion of our time is to concede to it too much, and also to paper over the contradiction and the obvious suffering that it causes, as opposed to just the suffering that it consoles or soothes or redeems, the way religion does. That it's too affirmative, and yet it's also the case that at a certain level it is that. Right. So even if it's not doing what religion once did, it's at least partially seeming to promise that. And like, is it like, are these spectacles of modern mass culture really Dionysian? No, not really. Like, is it like a way of socially acceptable breaking taboos? Yes and no, you know? Um, and so being aware of that contradiction. So, I invoke Durkheim in terms of it's not here's the formulation. It's not a biological species that has created a mechanism to perpetuate itself, but rather it's a mechanism that uses a biological species to perpetuate itself. So society is the thing, and humans are just the medium, rather than humans being the thing and society is the medium. Now, of course, Adorno was like, well, this is a kind of reification. This is a kind of ideology of capitalism. And yet it's also true. It's also true. It's why people in the past, in past civilizations and cultures, were willing to die to perpetuate their culture. Like, death before dishonor, that kind of attitude. That's what made sense. I mean, generally peasants didn't do that, right? It was monks, it was priests, it was clergy, or like the Buddhist monk. It's not your average Vietnamese peasant who's going to do that. It's going to be a Buddhist monk who's expected to do that on behalf of the community because he embodies the higher spiritual values. He is sacred in his body in a way that a peasant isn't. So there's a whole aristocratic framework in that because, of course, most clergy come from the aristocracy. They don't come from the commoners, right? So it's like a sanctification of people who are already considered privileged exemplars of the cultural community. And, we can't, we do a kind of ersatz version of that. We do a version of that, but we also have this notion of a kind of humanism. So I was thinking about it earlier, like transhumanism versus like humanism. And humanism as a kind of reactionary humanism in the face of capitalism, try to restore a kind of bourgeois humanism, or we say, fuck it, no, we're transcending the human. And what we have to be aware of is the symptomatic character of that antinomy. That we're either trying to restore a kind of bourgeois humanism and a kind of anthropological kind of human essence, trying to restore that, or we're trying to transcend it. I would say that both are one-sided projections of capitalism and a kind of, antinomical divided fantasy that neither is possible, neither is going to be the case. And so therefore we have to sort of pinch ourselves and realize, okay, this is like a dream generated from within capitalism that in any literal sense would be a nightmare. Right. And so really we have to try to figure out what the true content of that is. Like what is it that we would imagine we would achieve if we were to do either of those things?
Well, to kind of to go back so whether it's the Chud the Builder thing or it's Lily Phillips, like I'm gonna fuck 1,000 guys in a day with these types.
Which, by the way, she's not just doing that; it's going to be on camera, right? Because
Right.
otherwise, there's no point in doing it. Like, she's
Right.
not going to do it for its own sake. It's only worth doing if it's going to be filmed.
Same with
right?
Chud the Builder
Yeah.
dropping the N word. Like he wouldn't do this if it wasn't being live streamed, and it makes you go, is this where, like somehow, like the most fundamental consumer society value take like I don't know. I'm almost like this
I mean,
Kurt
look,
Cobain.
I'm not against any of this in a way. Like, obviously, I'm against like insulting people, trying to get them to attack you so that you can kill them. Like, that seems pretty twisted. I mean, obviously, there's something twisted about like gangbang marathon, like Guinness Book of World Records, porn star, like one trying to get an AVN award or something. Like there's something pathological about that too. Or like dude who's like breaking his face and whatever.
Yeah, clavicular.
Yeah, fucking clavicular. I'm like, but you're a handsome guy. What are you doing? And also like, fuck, like that body is really warped. Like, what is this? This is really body dysmorphia. Like, seriously.
Yes.
And it's like, what is happening here? And so it's not enough to have body dysmorphia. You also have to rehearse it on media.
Yep.
But and then all of these three different examples, which are very different. But I mean, Kurt Cobain, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Here we are now. Entertain us. It seems like
30 years later.
Yeah, like if that's what the fundamental value is of the consumer, is show me something I haven't seen before. That's what's relevant.
I mean,
or
look,
what's
we
valuable.
could revere people like that. We could revere people like that. We could revere them. We could just sort of say, okay, like this is like someone who's sacrificing themselves for us.
Yep.
And then it's like, but what form is that taking? and is this the form that is a meaningful self-sacrifice that serves the values of the community?
Well, then you get into the whole thing is like, is this also a way to try to, in some perverse sense, stand out as a human in this moment of AI where everything is AI slop and, like it seems like
What can the
all
human still
three,
do that AI can't do?
right? And all three are courting death in their own particular way. Like death drives functioning very apparently in all three of these examples. And it's like, there's a weird sense where you're like, is this some sort of I like, let's see what the human can do at this moment. It's weird. I don't even know how to fully articulate it myself, but it
I mean, look, I'm
seems
not here to say do something better with your life than be like a social media influencer, because there may not be anything better to do with your life, unless, of course, it's going to be to make the revolution. Can we do that? But, short of that, like, okay, be a office drone or be a porn star or be a body dysmorphia an actor or be like, an attention getter on social media in one way or another or be a Uber driver, like, okay, I'm not sure that I'm here to say, well, no, don't do that.
why
You
can't hey,
know.
be Prince writing and recording Purple Rain be an option for all of us?
Well, because it's not, right? Like, not everybody is as talented or as
Ah,
motivated,
damn it, life
right?
sucks.
Yeah, right? Um, and I don't know. So again, I think that the grimness of it is really what we're taking issue with. Meaning, if it was all actually fun, it would be not.
But is
It,
that what we're gonna
it's
look
miserable.
towards? Is that what's gonna get our attention? Are these grim moments of, it's almost like how people watch gore videos where, you know, in this moment where it's like seen it all, nothing new in pop culture, nothing new in politics, like nothing. It's like, are these extreme acts what consumers are going to want to consume more and more as AI
At least some of the
rises?
time.
Where I don't know, where it's the last, the last appearance of the human in some twisted sense.
My lifetime, which is basically from the 70s onward, I think has continuously, throughout my lifetime, there's been a continuous pushing the limits.
Hmm.
Um, there has been a constant fear of like uh driving to further extremes. And just as
Transgression
a
for
cultural,
transgression's sake.
yeah, and just as a cultural phenomenon. So again, for me, why this relates to the AI discussion is that I, of course, insist on not just an internal logic to these things, that I don't know, horror movies have to get more and more violent because actually it does sort of max out at a certain point. It does,
You hit the wall.
right? Like, meaning the 70s, 80s, those films were maybe a little bit more violent than stuff now, actually.
Yep.
You know? So it's not like
Or
that.
the ones now, hold on, or the ones
Saw.
now that like really try to go above and like to try to, I don't know, and I don't know if I want to call it a horror movie, but I think about a Serbian film or something where, yeah, obviously the content is disturbing, but it seems so forced or like so transgressive that I can't help but kind of laugh at the attempt where it's like, oh, you're just trying to show the most fucked up thing you can imagine for the sake of showing the most fucked up thing you can imagine. And there's
Human
something,
Centipede.
Yep.
yeah, that one, especially, what is it? Part two's the real disgusting one. But
Was it Korean who made that movie, or was it Japanese?
I'm
Or was it
not
American?
sure.
I
It's
kind
been
of feel
so
like
long
this is
since
one
I
of
saw
these
that.
crazy, East Asian things
But
like
no, you have
Squid Game
some
or
in the
something.
last couple decades that are more like on this artsy side. I think about Martyrs, right? Like it's, really fucked up. But again, I mean, they kind of set the standard in this Cannibal Holocaust and those kind of grindhouse movies. But point is,
So
it's
the
like
the context is what I zoom out to, meaning I say, okay, what is this expressing? Meaning, rather than focusing on the pathology of this or that example, I think, okay, what's the larger context within which this is happening and how to make sense of it that way?
well, I mean, a lot of I think back then you could say it was this reaction against the post-war Norman Rockwell type of regime where it's like, okay, we're gonna say things and show things that we're not supposed to. But again, this just comes
I
back
put
to
it
like,
more specifically in the political realm. I would say that the neoliberal era and maybe the failure of the new left, that there was a sense of potential emancipation that was betrayed, and then society just sort of spiraled down into like criminal depravity.
yeah. And then you could say like,
No.
well, we can't change. Almost like are these showing violence like this almost a symptom of the failure to change the political landscape?
Yeah, but also a reaction against the promise like that was held out. Meaning, like precisely because there was an actual possibility that the betrayal of that really caused a kind of catastrophic meltdown for people,
I mean, look,
you
as an
know?
artist, how do you feel about this potential to kind of bring it more back to AI for a minute? This idea of AI being able to have your image and likeness, and oh, you want a movie with Humphrey Bogart and Brad Pitt? Well, boom, here you go. You can, you want your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Star Wars, crossover movie? Here you go. Does this, like, when you think about, I don't know, maybe it's Benjamin and the aura of the artwork, but does this, in a sense, eat away or corrode the singularity of a great work of art, where we can just have this infinite, production of the new in every variation of it? It's almost like we have the ability to hack the multiverse and just whatever we want. I want X-Men with Superman, with Ninja Turtles, with hell, make Prince a superhero, make the purple one. Like,
No, I mean, look, I have no problem with that. Meaning, I've always wanted to make my epic sci-fi masterpiece film, and if AI lets me do it cheaply,
yeah,
that's fucking great, right? So basically, it is what you do with it. It's not just the instrument,
hmm,
right? It's actually how you use it. I do believe that ultimately that's the case. And then the question is, would other people find it compelling? Meaning, as an artist or as a writer, there's no point making art or making or writing unless there's an audience. And so for me, it's like, is this worth sharing? Would people get something out of it? Would there be some kind of like meaningful communication of an aesthetic experience?
hmm,
Would people find it meaningful? Would they like it? Would it be interesting enough? Would it be interesting enough for me to bother making it? And would other people find it interesting enough to experience it?
yeah. I mean, I
You
guess,
know,
like the idea that somebody could use AI to make a film that would appeal to, a broad number of human beings. Obviously, that would be some sort of collective aesthetic experience. My
right.
fear, Nance, I think you worry about this too, is that everybody will just lose themselves with their laptop creating their own stories and no singular,
particular. Yeah.
that
I mean,
there'll
I
be
feel
no
like
overarching great aesthetic work of art.
Mhm.
Hollywood and the studios have been an algorithm
For a long time.
all along. Yeah, like
Right.
it's already been this like assembly line production by
Exactly.
committee.
So do you need like a bunch of humans to make it, the endless credits at the end of a film where you're just
Yeah.
like, holy fuck, this film really sucked, but like a fucking 1,000 people wasted their time making this piece of shit. Right? And it's like, okay, let's just have one computer make it instead?
But politically, and maybe this is hyperbole, but I do think there's something when I feel bad. Like if I watch a show and it's bad, I empathize with the director or the PAs
producers
or the photographer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, oh my god, can you imagine how much crack they had to smoke to like make this shit?
But when
It's like,
when that's fully sanitized, it becomes far easier for us to just remain in our little bubbles. Paul Virilio wrote The Last Vehicle as an essay that I think continues to become more and more relevant. Look, Baudrillard and Virilio, for Mikey and I, they're super important. I don't think I used to think Baudrillard was too conservative, but now I don't. But this idea that we're going to plug into, for lack of a better term, our little matrix pod, and that's it, game over. The world is covered over by this simulation, by this matrix, whatever.
at least they weren't living each in their own matrix. In the Matrix,
right? Like in the Matrix, they're in the shared Matrix.
It was a collective environment, yeah. And I think the trouble is, like, no, we are living in our own particular matrices, and we don't interact.
When I saw the Matrix, and it was like, the machines have turned us into this, like the Duracell battery, and then like Neo wakes up in the thing, and I'm like, fuck, I would love to just be lying in like amniotic fluid, like plugged into virtual reality. Like that is like fucking great. Like, and all my needs are taken care of. And I'm at like the height of civilization, the 90s, right? Like the ideal version of the world or whatever, which is of course the 1990s. The peak, and the machines have a vested interest in keeping me happy so that I continue to produce energy for them. Like, why not? Like, like that's dystopia.
Well, remember, Cypher's like, put me back in.
Put me back.
Oh yeah, exactly. But he's the bad guy, right? And I'm like, no, he's not the bad guy. And then, but as it turns out, and Morpheus is a little bit like, of a religious fanatic, where you're just like, wait, I don't know about you, man. And then it's wonderful that Neo is a glitch in the system that the system needs and produces. Like, I love that. Like, I love the whole arc of the 3 movies. Like, I love the whole thing. Like, the first movie, I was like, oh, this is some anarchist bullshit. But then the second movie, I was like, okay, the humans are dancing underground and the machines are coming down on them. And I'm like, okay, machines, you got to kill these people now because this dancing is really bad. And then the third movie, with the Oracle and the Architect and blah, 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 and the Indian girl who can make rainbows, I was like, right, yeah, like reconcile the humans and the machines. That sounds good.
That's
why the fourth one is the best of the.
Okay,
of the
I have not seen that. I have been meaning to see it, but I was worried.
All right, you have to watch it, and then next time we have to discuss it because Nance and I have a special place in our
Resurrections.
Yeah. Wait, no, it's
Resurrections.
Not Revolutions, because that's the.
No, I think it's Resurrections.
Yeah, because it Reloaded, Resurrections, and then or Reloaded.
Reloaded, Revolution,
Resurrection. So yeah,
it's a fucking masterpiece.
Now, trust me, there's people who hear us say this and they're like, "What the fuck is?"
I'll hold you to that, man. Like,
okay, okay. I take it back. It's not a masterpiece, but I would say it is the culmination in the perfect way.
It's worthy. Okay,
yeah.
But I will say this: this is to me where like our interpretation of the film is what makes it great to us.
That's always true, and I am definitely guilty of that. I can turn any shit into a masterpiece in my own mind. If it's not like just totally throwing me off, if it's not actively preventing me from doing it, like Star Trek Picard, like at a certain point did actively prevent me from enjoying it, and or the new the Star Wars sequel series, like just actively threw me off, just like fuck, like so, I mean, but I try, right, exactly. So but this, again, for me, I am optimistic at a certain level. I mean, another way of thinking about it is the future is going to be better and worse than we think. it's going to be both better and worse than what we think.
All right, so hold on. I want to ask you, like, there's one more thing about AI I want to get to, and then there's some other stuff we want to talk to you before we conclude for the evening. But okay, based on what you just said, this kind of sport. So recently we had a great conversation with Adrian Johnston, and you know, Adrian, we're talking AI, and Adrian says the one thing that gives him hope when he thinks about this whole scenario with AI is like, let's say that we do approach artificial superintelligence and that this becomes a reality. He goes, here's my hope, here's my wager, is that superintelligence will be intelligent enough to comb through all of humanity's collective writings and theories, and it will come to the conclusion that the best theory to base humanity on and what it should go about seeking to do is Marxism. And that essentially the superintelligence will be what I like to call robo-Marx. And this is what gives him hope, is that the Marxist tradition is intellectually strong enough that the AI would go, yeah, this is the way we should seek to set up and establish society. And what I said to him, I'm like, yeah, the idea is that superintelligence would, you know, evaluate the situation and go, hey guys, why are you allowing 1,000 gazillionaires to have everything? This makes no fucking sense. We're not going to do this. This is not optimal for human flourishing. And if the AI is not, you know, threatened by us, and, you know, it would be robo-Marx. What do you think of the idea of a Marxist superintelligence?
So this is a fantasy that I've had. There's a series, there's a Netflix series called Travelers. And it's about you know, a dystopian future in which humans have fucked themselves, and they've created a quantum computer superintelligence. And the quantum computer's superintelligence tries to save humanity by intervening in the past. And so it takes volunteers from the future and it sends them to be incarnated in people in the present at their moment of death in order to change history. And the quantum computer superintelligence is called the Director. And I just thought, yes, I wish that I were the Director and I could intervene in history to save humanity from itself. Right? That would be, you know, but okay, so Marxism. So that's very like negative in the sense of like saving humanity rather than setting up an ideal society. Because I don't think that Marxism allows us to formulate an ideal society. I think that Marxism directs us to overcome capitalism. And then after that, it will be up to us, you know, and we might create a as worse or, you know, worse situation, as bad or worse situation than we have now. But we can at least overcome this problem that we have now. Right? So, which I would not characterize as 1,000 billionaires having everything. I wouldn't say that that's the problem. Because, you know, the billionaires are not free of the nihilism that we all suffer from, and they can't consume their wealth.
Yep.
And meanwhile, they do all sorts of crazy things to themselves. They make themselves suffer in ways that ordinary people can't afford to make themselves suffer. So, you know, I wouldn't want to be them. I'm not jealous of them. You know, I don't resent them. I don't think that they're at fault. I also think they can't save us. You know, like I can't make any appeal to them to at a philanthropical level to save us. So I think that it would be good, maybe, but then there's like which version of Marxism, right? Because Marxism has disintegrated and proliferated in all sorts of forms, and I certainly wouldn't want the world to be governed by like a Maoist AI Marxism, right? Like no. So uh but you know, again, the artificial intelligence, the super intelligence that transcends human intelligence, uh I see that in the form of society itself and also of specific kind of institutions and, you know, social formations. You know, so for instance, I take for granted that like political parties are more intelligent than their members.
Is
in
this where
terms of
you're
like
kind
the
of at
Socialist
your most
Party.
Hegelian, where you give? Aren't we kind of talking about Hegelian spirit in a sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, certainly. Right. But the problem being that the spirit of capitalism is a self-contradictory spirit, meaning it has a spirit of humanistic emancipation and it has a spirit of capital accumulation. And capital accumulation was supposed to, and still mostly we think of it as something that's meant to serve our humanistic values and their realization. But in fact, capital accumulation itself is a kind of self-contradictory process.
A
And
kind of
because of
cold
that
machine logic.
it has a cold machine logic, but even that wouldn't be a problem necessarily. The problem is that it's self-destructive. So capital accumulation is a self-destructive process that the perniciousness of it is that it keeps itself going by destroying itself. And then we're the sort of fodder for that. We're the casualties. We're the sort of roadkill of that process. But if it was just a matter of humans being sacrificed to capital, that may not be a problem because humans have always been sacrificed to society or to culture, to the gods. And so, okay, capital is our god, fine. The problem is it's a god that destroys itself. It's a bad infinity, to use Hegel's language, right? The problem is that capital is a bad infinity. And so we are tasked with overcoming it. We don't really have the choice of subordinating ourselves to it, nor do we have the choice of opting out of it.
Okay, so this is a perfect time to ask the last AI question. Okay, so President Cutrone,
Ha!
if you were in this position of power, right, and maybe it goes beyond being president. I don't know. You're in the position of
Director.
Stalin, who or whatever, like where you have absolute say. Like, okay, I'm going to guide this situation to the best of my ability. What would your approach to it be right now? Like, what would you try to enact or
Well, I mean,
deregulate, regulate? How would you approach it?
right now, I would try to do what I'm doing, which is to say, I wish that sometimes I wish I could replicate myself. I wish that there were 1,000 of me, to go out and inspire people. So if I were able to do that, then it would be that I would try to foster the self-organizing of the working class, to change conditions on the ground, and to produce a kind of social and political logic towards higher forms of organization that would manifest the crisis of capitalism and make it into more of a political issue than something that we have to sort of just feel one way or another about or think about one way or another the way we've been talking about it. Either doom pill or uh, you know,
Or
inhale some
accelerationist?
big gas, and like just roll with it. So that's what I would try to facilitate if I could. And I think that, Marxism would be informing it, but it wouldn't be like, it's not like front and center or in the driver's seat exactly. It's more like a kind of a conscience of that process, something to keep in mind, like, some historical perspective that transcends the immediate moment, that, keeps a kind of critical view of the past and keeps a sense of the task in terms of the future. Um, in terms of overcoming capitalism, not in terms of any particular realization of socialism or communism, but overcoming this problem that keeps humanity trapped in the way that it does. So that's what I would try to do. Now, of course, you can't do that from the position of capitalist political leadership. You can't do that as a mayor of New York City or as president of the United States or even as president of China or head of the Chinese Communist Party, unfortunately. They did try, and it turns out that that's not enough, that's not really the way to go about it. And so, because what ends up happening is that one becomes an instrument of capitalism, regardless of one's intentions, right? So that's why, I mean, I think that in some ways, more at the top than at the ground level of society, people are instrumentalized to capital. I think that Elon Musk is more of a pure instrument of capital than a worker is. Right? Because he has to like really subordinate discipline himself, to
Serving of
maximize.
abstract virtual logic that pulls
Yeah,
his strings.
right. And I think that that's why, I really push against the vilification of the ruling class because they really aren't to blame. I mean, I think I don't know if I've shared this fantasy with you guys. So here's another fantasy. The fantasy is I do a TED talk at Davos, and I convince everybody there to become a Marxist communist. They wouldn't be able to pull it off. And they would come back to me, a year or so later, and they would say, the problem is the workers don't want it. They resist it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Uh, because they would. Again, they would vote with their feet, they would resist it. Like, if all the, shareholders and management of all the companies were like, okay, workers, we're going to do communism now, right? The workers would be like, hell no.
All
Right?
right.
I'm
So
out.
let me take this opportunity. I read this to Adrian Johnston. I got to read it to you.
Okay.
So this is Leotard in Libidinal Economy. Leotard says, the English unemployed did not have to become workers to survive. They, hang on tight and spit on me, enjoyed the hysterical, masochistic, whatever exhaustion it was of hanging on in the mines, in the foundries, in the factories, in hell. They enjoyed it, enjoyed the mad destruction of their organic body, which was indeed imposed upon them. They enjoyed the decomposition of their personal identity, the identity that the peasant tradition had constructed for them, enjoyed the disillusions of their families and villages, enjoyed the new monstrous anonymity of the suburbs and the pubs in morning and evening.
You guys are really into the stuff of my youth. Berillio, Baudrillard, Leotard, like this is like very 80s, very 80s,
Well, yeah, we see for us they're still relevant, but I mean, is this not part of the issue though? Like,
Hopefully not anymore. Hopefully once we get out of neoliberalism, it won't be so relevant. Meaning, like this kind of, and so he's another Lacanian, Leotard, enjoy. I think
I
that it's
guess like
gotta
I don't
be.
think it's weird because I don't think he thinks there's a subject in the Lacanian sense, but it is jouissance. Like it is this idea
Yeah.
that the workers enjoyed. It's this idea like there's the libidinal
Libidinal.
economies of the workers did attach and invest in capitalism, in wage labor, in consumerism, and that simply sitting there and explaining to them how this goes against their interests is not going to work. So I read it because it's like your thought experiment or your fantasy of them coming back and go, they don't go for it. They don't want it. Where this to me is this enduring issue where working class people, they're suffering in a million different ways because of capitalism. And yet if you're like, try to take it from them, they're like, from my cold dead hand.
Absolutely. And rightfully so, by the way. Like, in other words, I would also very much identify with that. That they would, as a flat kind of proposition, they would choose the devil that they know, right? Over the devil that they don't know. Definitely. I guess, yeah, I mean, I think the big problem of the late 20th century was why the working class didn't bring about socialism. And I think that the intellectuals then raged about that and against that and tried to find other
And frowned upon them for their consumer enjoyment
yeah.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I hear that, I'm just like, oh, fuck you, Leotard. Like, no, like, just no.
But here's the thing. I don't think he's actually he's shaming the intellectuals because they think that they can stand above and dictate to the workers what they ought to do. And
sure, that's where that's coming from. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. No, that's his actual political background, is that it's a kind of, yeah. I mean, I think that
it
for
seems
me,
like the way we talk about it now, it seems like he was like doing PMC critique in a way. Like he
yeah,
was trying to
no,
say,
definitely. Most definitely he was doing that. So, okay, so here's the thing. I don't want to shame the workers for their consumerism. I don't want to shame the intellectuals either. Like, I don't think that it's moralistic or psychological, like either of those. I don't think that it's like a moral question or a psychological question. I think that it's much more of a practical question. It's about what the workers and the intellectuals should be doing, rather than a problem with their subjectivity or their psychology or their morality. That there does have to be a transformation, but that transformation would come from what they're doing rather than a predispositional one. And I think that there is a kind of agony in the wake of the new left, right? When I think of the 80s, like, to me, what the spirit of that time and why it might resonate with the present, why it might feel like we're still living in that time and it's relevant, is because we're living in the aftermath of a failed left. I think that that's really it. And so I think that I want to denaturalize that. In other words, I want to say, okay, I remember when leotard was fashionable, and I remember when he went out of fashion. And so if he comes back into fashion, I want to know the historical rhythm of that process, because he definitely went out of fashion.
I can say like
Mm.
there's parts of the book that really speak to me where it's because for me as somebody who is like I'm in I'm in both worlds here where I'm theory and I've studied Marxism a little bit where at least like and yet
Mhm.
I'm in wage labor and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just when I see somebody sitting there basically telling a room full of like academics, hey, you don't get what's going on with workers. You don't understand what's happening, what their libidinal investments
I
are.
see.
You don't get why you say they're like hugging their chains, but you're not getting what's really going on. This is all they got. And so you got to do a much better, job of, trying to rhetorically appeal to them than just basically doing, let me explain what's in your best interest and basically shaming them for whatever consumer enjoyment they have.
Well, from a Freudian perspective, like, let's leave the Lacanian question aside, but let's go back to the Freud, to the master,
Mm-hmm.
the master of the master discourse, in Foucault's language. Uh, we don't do anything that doesn't satisfy us libidinally. Everything that we do, in order for us to do it, must satisfy our libido.
Yeah.
But that's just like a truism, meaning the reason that that was important for Freud to establish was to establish that people can be satisfied by doing things that are detrimental to them, right? That they can satisfy a subjective need that is objectively harmful to them, right? In such a way that's objectively harmful
But
to
that
them. So
goes against like the image of Homo economicus, the human actor who only acts on the basis of rational self-interest. If you're identifying self-interest with pleasure, with that which sustains you and provides comforting pleasure. So this whole Freudian thing of discovering how we can get satisfaction from dissatisfaction, uh this is an important thing to understand when it comes to why workers are invested in their
it's a
jobs.
challenge to rational choice theory, if that's what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly to Homo economicus, because it obviously does serve what Marx called the social metabolism. It's kind of like the fate of Homo economicus in capitalism is contradictory, meaning the system is not particularly efficient; it wastes. And so I don't know. I almost think of like Bataille, expenditure, right? And that the point of society is to waste, actually.
Nance?
And no, and and again, like I think that Bataille is a symptom. In other words, that capitalism wastes, and then what Bataille does is project that onto all human cultures ever, right? He sort of understands like even the most like basic cultural communities as some kind of version of capitalism, which I guess anthropologically, in order for capitalism to be possible, it must be doing something like what former communities did,
I
right?
mean, don't
Past
you think he's doing
communities did.
some kind of metaphysics of excess energy where it's just that all societies have to deal with this kind of burden of the churn?
Yeah, I think that that's not necessarily true, though, right? Like, I'm not sure that that really is true. I would, my first determination of it would be that to say, isn't this the way we experience capitalism rather than being simply part of human nature? Um, and, it depends on how far you want to take the ontology. You could say that actually all life is a kind of expenditure, is a kind of superfluous, kind of expenditure of energy, waste of energy, some kind of I don't know, the earth soaks up the sun and, sends the energy out through all of the flora and fauna,
I, I mean,
in their
I do
life and
think
death.
I think Bataille is carrying on Marx. I think Marx is studying metabolism, and I think Bataille is attempting to continue interrogating the notion of metabolism at scale. But I also think there's some transhistoricism as well. I love Bataille, but I also think Bataille's really wrong about some things.
Yeah, well, for sure. And also, again, I'm not sure that we do experience capitalism as not a uh, equilibrium proposition. We do experience capitalism as a dysregulated, not really an ecological harmonious thing, in the way that it gives rise to notions of the natural economy, whether that's pre-industrial bourgeois society or whether it's like subsistence agriculture or whether it's more radically kind of hunter-gatherer, like only living off what nature provides and only sustaining the human population that nature can provide for spontaneously, you know and the hunter-gatherer communities and the ancient civilizations, traditional civilization, did have a notion of providence, which is that human flourishing is tied to what the divine provides. And bourgeois society and then capitalism has more of a bootstrapping, that we kind of create our own subsistence in a way that's different from before. There's a kind of a artificial or synthetic subsistence that's different from the ecological relation to nature.
Yeah, you got to mix the sweat with the soil. Labor theory of value. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, but I would say that, even though there is the sort of expulsion from the Garden of Eden, like eat by the sweat of our brow kind of thing in the Old Testament, it seems to mean something different in capitalism than it did for people before that,
yeah.
right? So that kind of theology was there for thousands of years, but it doesn't seem to have meant the exact same thing as what we experience now. So that's why I would be careful. Again, I went, I will say this is the annoying thing of an old person. I worked through all this stuff. Bataille, Lyotard, Baudrillard. I did it all, right? And I came out the other side. And I can say, after having that spiritual journey, Marx
Hmm.
and Freud. Freud is good too. But I dealt with Lacan before I dealt with Freud. I did what everybody does. I got warped by Lacan before I got straightened out by Freud.
I can tell you, Nance and I, one of our dream conversations is you and Adrian Johnston, because
We did with Doug.
oh,
We
you did?
did.
Okay.
Me and Adrian did do one with Doug, and then we ended up agreeing more than we disagreed.
Yeah. Okay.
It was good.
Did you
Because
specifically address, like, so the main thing
Yeah.
though, because I do vaguely remember that, was it ever the Lacan question though? Because that, I think, is where there's the most fundamental disagreement.
I have to recall how exactly it was posed. Maybe it was posed in such a way as to foster agreement rather than disagreement. But I think that also the direction that the conversation took had to do with, like, Lacan being a fulfillment of Freud, whereas I was insisting that there was a difference. But then the version of Freud that I had, he thought was the correct version of Freud, actually.
Okay.
And so, I thought that, again, there's probably more for us to explore there.
Yeah.
However, in terms of disagreement, there certainly is more to explore there. But I thought that he had a good understanding of Freud, and he thought that I had a good understanding of Freud. And so maybe we kind of politely, like, deferred the Lacan disagreement. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe that's how the dynamics of it went. But I would say that, we didn't really tie it back into Marx very strongly. I mean, there was a little bit of it. And, he knew that I was coming from a Frankfurt School background. And, I was thinking also about Marcuse and surplus repression, like Eros and Civilization. And, is there a work drive or not? And why and how Marcuse and other people in the Frankfurt School rejected the death drive idea. And I always thought that it was a funny kind of thing that they did with the death drive, because I always had a sense that Freud didn't mean it very literally, meaning that the desire for death doesn't mean literal death. It's more psychic death, which is very different, and has to do with primary narcissism. It doesn't have to do with literal termination of life, you know? And so I thought that they treated it more literally than it ought to be in Freud.
Yeah.
But I also
totally.
understood why they took issue with it, meaning that they feared that it was some kind of naturalization of something specific to capitalism, and that's where, again, the idea of a surplus repression and, the aggression getting the upper hand over Eros, you know, and so I'm sympathetic, although I think that Marcuse might have tried to resolve things a little too nicely in Eros and Civilization. But that doesn't mean that I would embrace some kind of, like, again, ontological darkness of existence, and so yeah, it's tricky because I think that I am more either agnostic or careful about what I assume to be baseline reality and what I anticipate might happen in the future. So I think that I'm just a little bit more cautious about that.
Okay. So
Yeah,
okay,
in terms of yeah.
oh, sorry. Before we wrap this up, I told Nance, I was like, there's something I got to ask Chris about. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
okay, so to shift gears just for a moment, do you feel like Trump has made a series of decisions in the last 6 months or so that are very bad decisions on his part, where somewhat careless? So look, I can tell you this: I've never seen my right wing friends, coworkers more mad at him than they are right now.
Now, because of the war, the Iran war.
So it's withholding, putting out redacted Epstein files. They're sitting there going, you should have just released them as is. It makes them go, no, you're actually in there, right? Then there's the Iran thing. Then there's this gas crisis, right, that is looming. Everything I've read up on says that, we're tapping into the reserves. They're going to be depleted sometime in June. We're going to go back to like rationing gas, $5 a gallon, $6 a gallon possibility. And yesterday, a reporter said this to Trump. When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are American financial situations motivating you to make a deal? Trump responded, not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that motivates me. That pissed off a lot of people.
Sure.
And
okay, but so rather than thinking about like, do we approve of or don't disapprove of that sentiment on Trump's part? Okay, he said it, so that's it. Meaning, he, earlier, I think several months back, he was asked by the New York Times, like, who do you feel like you have to answer to? And he's like, only to my own conscience. All right, well, he's president for 2.5 more years, and that's that, right? Like, he won't be stopped. He's not going to be stopped. So the question is, why? Like, so why can't Iran have nuclear weapons? And why can't it have, I saw an interview with Marco Rubio, where it was like, okay, they had developed a ballistic missile capacity that would make it impossible to militarily intervene and prevent them from getting nuclear weapons. And so it had to be stopped now. Like the whole thing had to be stopped now. And, of course, maybe the attack last year, the 12-day war, maybe this is all like incentivizing Iran to get nuclear weapons. And, and I think that people think that he was manipulated by Israel.
a lot of people seem to be thinking that.
Yeah, I don't. Because he was on about this in the first term.
Yep.
And in some ways he's been on about this since the 80s. Right? He's always talked about Iran being a problem and why did
the Iron Sheik, Vince McMahon, the Iron Sheik, talking about Iran, like this runs deep with, and Donald Trump and Vince McMahon are, they're close.
Trump
homies.
hosted WrestleMania 4 and 5 at Trump Plaza, and
yeah. Like,
I mean,
this
look,
is not.
It might seem ill-conceived and sort of, a mistaken focus. It might seem inexplicable. It might make no sense. But he's doing it.
Okay, but if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, right? Isn't the irony here that the very thing he's doing to prevent Iran from basically destroying the world is gonna destroy the world because the gas crisis actually has way more negative effect than them having a nuclear weapon at their disposal?
I mean, this is what the Democrats are saying.
Yeah.
So I think that we should take all of this with a grain of salt. I started off with like, the better Democrats, AOC and Bernie, and, talking about their tendentiousness. But now we'll just talk more generally about the tendentiousness of the Democrats.
So you don't think the gas crisis that the Democrats are talking about is going to be as bad as they're making it?
I don't know. I wrote an article last year called Fear Itself. I was solicited by Compact Magazine to write something on the tariffs. And I wrote it, and they were just like, fuck no. Like, they didn't want to publish it. And because they were very uncomfortable with what I was saying, which turned out to be true, which is that Trump doesn't care. He is a lame duck president, and that means he answers to no one. He doesn't care about the Republicans. He doesn't care about anything. Right? He's president. He's going to do what he thinks is right. And last year, the occasion for that was the tariffs. And there is a plan, there is a point, there is like an agenda, there is something that he's trying to accomplish. And, again, that looked like an act of folly. The tariffs looked like self harm. That's what the Democrats said. It was economic self harm. It didn't turn out to be. Now, the war is a more dicey proposition. It is, for sure. It's a risk and it's a gamble he might lose, but he's going to try to see it through.
Does he not care about his base anymore?
No, he never
Anymore.
did. He never did.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think he would have said this whole thing about I don't care about how this financially affects Americans. I don't think he would have even said that a year ago. I think he's kicked into somewhat of a new mode here.
He might be, because there are two things. Like, obviously, the main thing that Trump wants to do is restore the American economy in some hyper neoliberal terms. So I've talked about Trump as a post neoliberal, but we can also consider him as a hyper neoliberal. So what I was describing about the red state AI build out and, throwing all caution to the wind and huge tax incentives and no environmental regulation, all this stuff, right? That's like a kind of hyper neoliberalism. It's not post neoliberalism or anti neoliberalism, or it's one side of the post neoliberalism. It's kind of hyper neoliberalism. So there's that. That is his main agenda. But he does have a foreign policy agenda too. And the foreign policy agenda is that he wants to clear all the lingering stuff from the preceding historical era. He wants to. Now, of course, whether he can is something else. But he wants to settle Israel-Palestine. He wants to stop the Ukraine war. He wants to stop Iran from being a rogue actor in the Middle East. He also wants to stop Israel from being a rogue actor in the Middle East. And the way that you do that is to get rid of Israel's number one enemy, meaning then Israel doesn't have an excuse anymore. That's also part of it. So he wants to settle these things because he sees like the previous administrations just sort of accepting unacceptable situations and throwing up their hands and being like, there's nothing we can do about it. And it's too risky to try to do anything about it. And he's like, well, then why be president at all? Like, why be a superpower at all? Why have these things like a massive military budget at all if you're not going to actually do something with it? It's not the Cold War anymore. He definitely thought that something was squandered in the 90s. Some possibility for the United States and for the world was wasted in the 90s. And, I always say when he says make America great again, it's the 90s. And so it's not like the 50s or something, it's the 90s. And it's the wasted opportunity that he saw back then. When he was a much younger man, and was already toying with the idea of running for president. And so, he has an agenda. He has things that he wants to accomplish. He's got one term to do it. He's going to try. And one of the things he's trying to accomplish, I mean, the other thing is, does he want to destroy Iran? No. He wants to normalize things with Iran, which he thinks is impossible if they have nuclear weapons.
Okay, but with his base and the America First thing, I'm just saying the base doesn't see this as making America great.
He thinks it's in their long-term interest. So in Fear Itself last year, I said, look, he's thinking about not people today, but their grandchildren. Right? And the point of the matter is that people are willing to sacrifice their happiness for a better life for their children and grandchildren. They are. He knows that. And, and he's saying, we're going to do it this way.
I know, but
now.
Gas prices keep going up.
I took a road trip last weekend and I was like, wow, $4.99 a gallon. And I was like, and you can't, as far away from Chicago as I get, I'm driving downstate to Springfield to do a pilgrimage to the shrine of Abraham Lincoln, and the gas is not getting any cheaper. Right? It's like, wow, like rural Illinois, still $4.99.
Yeah, what happens if it gets to the point where people can't afford to actually get it to go to work? $8 a gallon.
I get that. No, I understand that. I mean, literally, he has said hardship now to save us from bigger problems down the road. And
we're Americans. We're not good at looking down the road.
Well, that's why he's going to do it for us, right? I
Mm.
mean, he's he's thinking, well, certainly the Democrats try to make the working class sacrifice in their own best interest.
Yeah.
Come on.
I think that hardship now for a better future, that's very much a Democrat position.
That's a universal theme, right? So are we going to like stop eating burgers, or are we going to pay more for gas for a little while? Right? He's like, no, we're going to still eat burgers. We don't care about cow farts and methane. Right? Fuck no, because he only eats like beef, right? Pretty much. And so, you know what I mean? So he's like, no, I won't give up my steak, but I will like be this villain president that everybody hates, but who still leaves things better than they were before.
I know for me, when talking about all this, AI, all this shit, what's going to happen with Iran, China, and Trump and Tim Cook and Elon and all these tech guys are currently
They're all there in China now.
Yeah, they're all buddy with Xi, and I think Iran is gonna. I think yesterday I was very pessimistic on Iran after this meeting that Trump had with President Xi. I think maybe
Xi's gonna cut Iran loose.
Yeah,
definitely, that's happening.
Yeah, but I get to this point where I'm like, okay, we have people just are not going to be able to afford living. Like all of these questions, all of this stuff.
Super hardship, not only in the United States, but in Latin America, Africa, Asia, like East Asia, especially. Like it's really, really impacting people very harshly.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It most definitely is. I mean, look, so he's just not doing the cautious approach. He's taking a big risk, a big gamble. He is. That's true. Right. And
so it's almost like we have to hope that it works out.
Oh, no, for real. I mean, that's the thing that I wrote last year, too, in the same article, Fear Itself. You guys should read it. I quote Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is like, actually, the only thing guaranteed in capitalism is the adventure.
Right.
That's not a bad quote.
It's a good quote. Fuck it. Ben Shapiro. I can't stand Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is full of shit, right? But, but it's like, that's kind of true. And he said it in a kind of despairing way, and it is like, okay, this guy was elected and now we're on the ride. And
all of us are kind of, I think we're better equipped to kind of go along with the ride because I think so many of us resisted it. I'm telling you, I see his people being the ones in the next few months. If things get worse and worse, they're going to be throwing, the shitstorm.
Yeah, I mean, sure. No, I mean, Tucker Carlson.
They've all Tucker, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens. They've all turned
everybody's flipping out.
Alex
They're flipping out.
Yeah.
I mean, the sad part is that they think that like demons are controlling the world and Israel is like an instrument of the devil. And like Tucker on a recent interview with Lulu, of New York Times, like he's like, well, Muslims and Christians believe all humans have souls. And he didn't say Jews believe all humans have souls. And, and it's like, fuck. And then he said on his own show that he thinks that Jews have always tried to pit non-Jews against each other. Yeah. So no, it's for real. Like this is really happening. And I know that we wanted to talk maybe about UFOs. We may not get to it.
Yeah, that was the last thing.
But JD Vance was like, I believe that there are UFOs, but they're not extraterrestrial. They're demons.
Yep. Well, that comes out of Genesis chapter 6, where the sons of God come down and fuck women because they're hot, and it's
right?
demons.
Well, that's the big.
lemurs.
That's the line. That's the line on a lot of these faux populist, ostensibly right wing politicians that they're saying, oh, it's not literal aliens, it's biblical demons and stuff.
Well, guys, when I was tapped into, I was a Baptist, for many years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like literally at the church, the Independent Baptist Church I went to, I'll tell you this, like they teach you their doctrine. Like you get this concentrated education in it. No, we did Bible studies where we go through Genesis 6 and then we run the references. And no, I mean, this pastor would tell you that aliens are going to show up in the end times. They're going to come down off of ships,
It's
and they're
X-Files.
actually
Yeah.
demons.
Talking about the 90s, it's X-Files, right? So who's right, Mulder or Scully? Mulder thinks it's aliens, Scully thinks it's demons. Like Scully understands it in religious apocalyptic terms, and Mulder understands it in like alien apocalypse, like Armageddon terms.
Turns out to be
And
both at the same
it
time.
turns out to be both. Yes. Right. And that's where I feel like, okay, 90s, you know, like really, like what kind of Gnostical demon is controlling the world that we're going to be like living through like the pop culture of my youth?
But seriously, Chris,
Really?
the episode of Tucker Carlson's show that we were mentioned on because of Conrad Flynn, right? It's when
Right.
Conrad was talking to Tucker about Nick Land, and Nick Land, part of his whole theory are these 45 lemurs or spirits or demons, whatever you want to call them, that
Damn.
are, you know, essentially pulling the strings. And Nick's, you know, he basically is doing what he calls Gnostic Calvinism now. And this is,
Yeah.
it's caught on. And so I mean, even on the right, you have the Christians who are sitting there learning about this shit like Tucker going, this is all completely demonic. And, you know, the tech side of this, you know, the AI boom, like they're believing in lemurs or demons or something. And it comes from this guy,
They're
Nick
giving into
Land.
the devil. They're giving into the devil, right?
Well, yeah. And that's,
And
yeah. Nick has said basically, look, if you're a Christian, then you're going to think I'm satanic. Like,
yes. Or Peter Thiel was like, you know, I'm not sure that I'm not the Antichrist.
right.
Right.
While ranting about the Antichrist.
Well,
Yeah.
ranting about the Antichrist, but you know, exactly. So, you know, it's like a kind of struggle with the Antichrist, and maybe that's an internal struggle.
Yeah.
You know, like it's something that everybody has to struggle with not becoming the Antichrist or something, you know, risk being the Antichrist. So it's like it's a funny moment, isn't it? But I think we're going through a phase. And with that stuff, right? Now with the Iran war, that's something else. That's a real thing. And I also wrote in that article, don't expect Trump to blink. He's not going to blink. All right, he might pause, he might like go about it a different way, but he's not going to give up.
All right, so
He's not going to give up on any of it.
But on that note, Nance, what you were doing with thinking about aliens and how it basically could be ideology. Why don't you say something before we end? That?
I mean, I've look, man, I've always wanted as badly as so many people want Jesus to come down and rapture the deserving believers. I want aliens to come down. Like that's my
fantasy.
That's my ultimate fantasy is that aliens come down and save us all from ourselves and all that. But it's also extremely compelling and it does seem to be more on the so-called right, where they're making these appeals to aliens and disclosure. I think Spielberg has a movie coming out soon.
Really?
Yep.
Trump just released all these FBI documents of disclosure and all this stuff, and it just seems so.
Because Spielberg did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is a great movie.
But this one's called Disclosure Day.
Yeah, it's just so blatantly.
But Nance, in your new episode, Nance, on 3 Billion Nances, Nance did a solo episode where you were talking about a lot of this, and you were saying from what you've looked at, you don't see any really compelling evidence.
It's all a nothing burger. It's all. I mean, clearly, come on, dude, aliens wouldn't. We're not going to find out about aliens from an FBI disclosure. If and when they come down, it will be like Klaatu landing on your front lawn. Like and that's why it's not going to happen. Like we're not going to live to see it.
By the way, I am Klaatu. I was kidnapped by the Marxist aliens and sent back with the message. Right? I was body snatched by Marxism. Now I'm back to deliver judgment.
Yeah.
I am
I
Klaatu.
just, it's so,
Cutrone
it's
Christ?
so, it's so blatantly ideology. It's so blatantly, and I do think, okay, Venezuela, or going back, Epstein, Venezuela, Iran, all of Asia, like there's so much going on right now. I just think that all this alien stuff, all this disclosure stuff right now, it's,
He promised to do it from the beginning. And it
Yeah.
all ends up being like a little bit of a nothing burger. Like he released the JFK files and the Martin Luther King files, and it sort of had no impact. And
Did we find out who killed JFK?
not exactly. I mean, Anna Paulina Luna, I thought, had a press conference about that, right?
Yep.
And you know, she was saying that there's, you know, irrefutable evidence of multiple shooters. You know, so they seem to know something, but not much more than they did before. So I think that, I mean, for me, like, yeah, the Epstein files. It's hard to prove a negative.
Mm.
Like, can you prove that Trump's not in the Epstein files? No, you can never prove that. You can never prove a negative. That's not possible.
Well, can't you if you have all of them unredacted?
No, but there's so many millions that you'll never be able to release everything. Meaning someone will say that files were destroyed or not everything was released. I mean, basically, it's a unsatisfiable demand.
Unsatisfiable demand. That sounds like a perfect quilting point to end on. Kind of defines our whole situation, I suppose. Unsatisfiable demand. So
I don't think of socialism that way, by the way. I don't think of it as an unrealizable thing. I don't agree with Žižek and Badu that communism is a regulative ideal, a kind of a eternal principle, the eternal invariant that one is always striving for but never achieving. I don't think of socialism that way. I think of it as a determinate historical problem to be achieved in secular time.
And it's up to
that
us.
is why you're the last
Yeah.
Marxist.
It is. Yeah, I don't have to become a Platonic communist or whatever. No.
Well, this has been fantastic, Chris. We won't keep you any longer.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Everybody, just check out Chris Cutrone's work, Platypus. You can check out Chris's two books
what
on
is it?
Amazon.
Fear Itself, you said?
Fear Itself, the article from
Fear
last
Itself.
year.
Yeah, give
Fear
us
Itself.
these two articles, that one, and then
I'll send a link.
Robots and Sweatshops.
Sweatshops.
Robots and
Yep.
Sweatshops. Yeah.
I'll
I'll
send it
provide
out.
those links in the description.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.